Today we're out here in cloudy Carmel, California, taking a look at the 2017 Nissan Pathfinder. For 2017, Nissan has taken their popular three-row crossover and they've thoroughly tweaked it. This is not an all-new vehicle. In fact, most of the interior is essentially the same as the 2016 Pathfinder. However, we get a new engine, new hood, new bumpers, front and rear, new options, new option packages, a new infotainment system, and some other tweaks on the inside to help keep it fresh. What that really means to you as a shopper in this segment is that the bulk of the Pathfinder remains the same. This is still one of the most comfortable and one of the most family-friendly crossovers in this segment. The front end is where we see the biggest change for 2017. We have all new headlamps that are actually a little bit narrower than before to give it a slightly more aggressive look. We have a new front bumper, a slightly bolder chrome grille that's a little bit more divorced from the body color painted sections of the front bumper. New fog lamps, new lower dam, etc. The whole look is a little bit square and a little bit more aggressive than the last generation Pathfinder, and then we have a hood that's just a little bit taller than the last generation as well. If you didn't like the sheet metal on the 2016 Pathfinder, you're probably not going to like the sheet metal on the 2017 Pathfinder, because aside from the hood, all the rest of the metal body remains the same, including the rear tailgate. That means that at 197.2 inches long, this is still one of the larger three-row crossovers on sale in the United States. This is a little bit shorter than the Ford Explorer or the Chevy Traverse, but this is significantly longer than a Toyota Highlander or a Kia Sorento. That means we get considerably more room, especially in the third row, versus those smaller three-row crossovers. The general styling of the rear end is sort of variation on a theme. We get all new headlamps that stick out from the body just a little bit more than before, a slightly more aggressive lower treatment to the bumper, but again, the hatch is still the same. Since we're in the top-end Platinum model, we have parking sensors integrated into the rear bumper, we have a 2-inch receiver standard that's available in other trim levels, and we have a 7-pin trailer wiring harness connector. The only real change with the tailgate is that it is now foot activated in some models. This is very similar to what we see in the Ford Explorer and some of the other crossovers out there. Under the new hood, we find a new 3.5-liter V6 engine. Power is up from 260 horsepower last year to 284 horsepower, thanks to this engine now incorporating direct injection. Torque also rises from 240 foot-pounds to 259, and interestingly enough, fuel economy remains the same at 23 miles per gallon combined if you get the front-wheel drive model. Obviously, the all-wheel drive model is going to be a little bit lower. A point worth noting is that this vehicle was rated on the new 2017 EPA cycle, not the older 2016 EPA cycle. So when you're comparing this to the competition, keep in mind that if most 2016 models were rated on the new cycle, they would see about a 1 mile per gallon drop in their combined rating. That means that in actuality, this may be ever so slightly more efficient than the 2016 model. Thanks to the new engine under the hood, Nissan has upped the towing rating of the Pathfinder to 6,000 pounds. That's nearly the tops in this segment. You will find 200 pounds more towing capacity in the V6 Dodge Durango, about 1,400 pounds more in the V8 Dodge Durango, but this is about 1,000 pounds higher than every other entry in the segment. So the Ford Explorer, the Highlander, the Pilot, etc., they all top out right around 5,000 pounds. It's worth noting that the way the Pathfinder tows is different from the competition, because this still uses a continuously variable transmission or CVT under the hood. It's not a traditional stepped automatic. Nissan tells us that there really have not been many substantive changes to the transmission other than software and improved cooling. That means that the effective low ratio in this transmission is still a bit higher than we see in the average 6-speed in this segment, definitely higher than we see in something like the Honda Pilot. That means that when you're starting off from a standstill and you have 6,000 pounds attached to the vehicle, this is going to be depending on the torque converter to help get you off the line. It's going to feel a little bit more sluggish in the 0 to 30 time if you're towing a heavy trailer than something like the Ford Explorer or the Honda Pilot. On the flip side, of course, Nissan actually bothered to get this SAE certified for towing, so this is following the same certification processes and procedures that we see in most of the pickup trucks these days. A large number of the competition that's rated to tow 5,000 pounds by their manufacturers have not been certified, so that means that this vehicle's cooling system and the braking system are definitely set up for towing that kind of weight. The 2017 Pathfinder still uses the same seats as the 2016 model, so the front comfort and rear comfort scores are going to be the same as that outgoing model. We don't have a 4-way adjustable lumbar support like you do find in some of the competition, but we do have an available power tilt telescopic steering column and 2-position seat memory. These seats are a little bit wider and a little bit more cushy than some of the entries in this segment, meaning that larger drivers and larger passengers should be more comfortable in this than some of those entries with very narrow seats. Seating capacity in all Pathfinders is 7. There's no 6-seat and there's no 8-seat version available, even though this is just about as wide across the back as we find in some of the 8-passenger vehicles. That just means that 3 across the second row are going to be a little bit more comfortable than something narrow like a Highlander, and the 2 people in the third row are certainly going to be more comfortable than the 3 people in the Highlander's third row. Moving over to the right side, this front seat is all the way back in its tracks, and I have about 5 inches of legroom left there. Now, we also have sliding seats, which is something that we do not see in many full-size SUVs like Nissan's own Armada. That means that you can actually give the third row passengers more legroom than you'll find in many large 3-row crossovers. The Pathfinder has another family-friendly trick up its sleeve. This is the only entry in the segment where you can have a forward-facing child seat latched into place and still move this seat forward in order to give you access to that third row. This is how it works. We pull the lever on this seat up, and the seat bottom cushion, you'll notice, tilts forward. The whole seat actually moves forward and then slides forward like that into the front seat in order to give you access to the third row. What's unique about this design is that if we don't have a child seat attached to it, it actually moves in an entirely different direction. The seat bottom cushion pops up in order to give you even more access to the third row. Now, this is just the 40% side of this second row. If you're taking a look at this 60% side, it always moves in that fashion. If I pull this lever right over here, seat bottom cushion always flips up and slides forward. Although the Pathfinder does not have the largest combined legroom figures, and that would be front row, second row, and third row in this segment, it does have one of the most comfortable third rows. If I slide the second row seat all the way back in its tracks, and then lock it back into position, my knees are touching the seat back, but I have more headroom than you'll find in most 3-row crossovers. If, however, I adjust the front seat and the second row seat to divide the legroom between all 3 rows evenly, I'd have about 3 inches of legroom across all 3 rows, and I am 6 feet tall, so that really gives you an idea of how much legroom we have going on in this vehicle. One of the big reasons to buy a crossover over a traditional body-on-frame SUV is the overall packaging efficiency of the vehicle. It's really obvious when you take a look at this cargo area. Even though the Pathfinder is shorter than something like a Nissan Armada or Chevy's Tahoe, we actually have about the same kind of cargo room in the back, just about 16 cubic feet behind these third-row seats. Under the cargo area load floor, we find some additional storage space, and we have the ability to put in cargo dividers to help separate your cargo. This is also where you'll find the optional subwoofer. As I said before, the majority of the interior is identical to the last model. That means we get a small sunroof optional up front and this optional large panoramic moonroof behind that. We have height adjustable seatbelts for both the driver and the front passenger and 2-way adjustable headrests. We do have available heated and ventilated front seats, and the front door styling is largely the same, although we do get new trim. You can see we have imitation wood right there next to that imitation satin metal. Although we do find hard plastics around the speaker grille, that lower portion of the door, and those storage cubbies, the upper portion of the doors are all soft touch plastics, including that armrest. The dashboard, however, is primarily cast out of a hard plastic. So we have a hard plastic upper, hard plastic airbag cover right there, and then we have a large bin style and combination slot style glove compartment. This is really quite large. You can actually fit certain laptop computers in there, and we have a second storage shelf right above. The big change in the cabin is this new infotainment system, which is similar to the systems that we see in the Nissan Maxima and some of the Infiniti product line. This is very different than the last generation model, even though this control panel is very much the same. We now have app integration, XM satellite radio, HD radio are all standard in all models, and of course we have the available 360-degree camera. If you want to know more about this infotainment system, you will have to wait until we can get our hands on one for a complete week. We have not had the chance to do a full video review on that one. Below that, we find a slot for our optical disc player, some of the radio system and audio system controls, radio, disc, media direct access buttons. Find the controls for the tri-zone climate control. There is a third zone in the rear. And then below that, we have a storage area where we have 2 12-volt power outlets. The controls for the heated and ventilated seats are still right here in the redesigned center console. The shifter is still a traditional console shifter with drive and a low mode. And you'll still find a control for the all-wheel drive system that's somewhat unique. We have the ability to put this into 2-wheel drive mode, which helps improve fuel economy. There aren't too many crossovers out there with all-wheel drive that offer that. Most people will likely keep it in the auto position, but you can also lock the center coupling by rotating it to that lock position. This vehicle also features hill descent control and 2 very large cup holders. The center console is softly padded, and it has 2 sections. There's an upper section right here. You see there's enough room for wallets, phones, that sort of thing. And then there is a deeper lower section where we have the headphones for the rear entertainment system. We have the remote control for that as well. This is where you'll find the USB inputs, the SD card for the mapping database, video and audio inputs. We have essentially the same instrument cluster as before on the driver's side with the color LCD in the middle. Zooming out from there, we have the same steering wheel as before, infotainment controls on the left, cruise controls on the right. As I usually say with first drives, these numbers are preliminary because I haven't had the chance to test this on my usual test course at home, even though I am a little bit close to home here in Carmel. That's especially important for the acceleration as well as the braking figures. Thanks to the extra power we see out of this new engine, we ran from 0 to 60 in 6.9 seconds. That was about 0.2 of a second faster than the last Pathfinder that we tested. The improved power is certainly noticeable when you get out on the highway, but the other thing that you'll notice is the changed logic in this continuously variable transmission. Over time, Nissan seems to be moving away from CVTs that behave overtly like CVTs to CVTs that tend to try and imitate automatic transmissions. So depending on how you're driving this transmission, what your foot is doing with the throttle, etc., this may attempt to imitate a stepped automatic transmission. Now personally, I'd prefer a CVT that just did its CVT thing. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comments section down below. Would you rather your CVT just hung out at a high RPM when you're accelerating, or do you want it to imitate a traditional automatic and actually have gear shifts that feel more like a traditional 6 or 7 speed? Anyway you slice it, however, acceleration times in the Pathfinder end up being among the faster in this segment. Something like the brand new Mazda CX-9, which does get excellent fuel economy, will take nearly a full second longer to get from 0 to 60. In our preliminary braking scores, we stopped from 60 to 0 in 128 feet. We are in the top-end Platinum model, so we do have different tires going on than you will find in the base model. The stopping distance can be attributed to the relatively lightweight in this vehicle. I know 4,200 to 4,300 pounds doesn't sound terribly light, but consider that something like a Chevy Traverse can be nearly 5,000 pounds when fully loaded. You'll notice that this is definitely one of the lighter options in this segment. In fact, Mazda's brand new CX-9, which has been touted as one of the lightest entries, is really only about 100 pounds lighter than this. The lighter curb weight also helps handling, even though the Pathfinder has one of the softer suspensions in this category. We definitely have a great deal of tip and dive, a great deal of body roll in the Pathfinder, but it actually holds the road better than you might think. It is a little difficult to comment on cabin noise, but we scored 72 decibels in this cabin, which means this is fairly average for the three-row crossover segment. Fuel economy is an area where the Pathfinder has traditionally excelled, and this model doesn't appear to be any different from that. Although we haven't been behind the wheel for very long, I have averaged a fairly impressive 22 miles per gallon, even though we were 0 to 60 testing this vehicle. Mazda's brand new CX-9 does deliver notably better fuel economy than the Pathfinder or every other entry in this segment. However, their 2.3-liter turbocharged engine is not as powerful as the V6 that we see in this model, and it's very noticeable when we start taking a look at those acceleration scores. You may get a few more miles per gallon, but it's going to take you a full second longer to get from 0 to 60. If you didn't like the 2016 Pathfinder, you probably won't like the 2017 Pathfinder out on the road. Instead, what they've tried to do is just refine things a little bit. We get a cabin that seems to be slightly quieter. The steering is just a little bit more to my tastes. It's definitely a little quicker. It's not more communicative, however. It's still a little bit difficult to tell what the front wheels are doing, but it does seem to be a little bit more engaging out on winding mountain roads than the last model. The key areas where the 2016 Pathfinder excelled versus the competition still apply to this 2017 model. We get a supple ride that's very comfortable, especially for highway journeys, although I would recommend getting the 18-inch wheels, not the 20-inch wheels, if you're looking for a soft highway cruiser. And of course, we get excellent fuel economy. Nissan provided a short off-road course to demonstrate the all-wheel drive system on the Pathfinder. That's pretty typical at launch events like this. However, the Pathfinder does offer a few features that you don't find in your average three-row crossover. We have the ability to manually lock the center coupling in the all-wheel drive system. That permanently splits the power 50-50, assuming no slip in the system. The software also alters the way the stability and traction control system behaves, allowing the car to move over obstacles as if it had a limited slip differential. This only works in limited situations, and of course it's not going to be as robust as a true limited slip differential or an actual locking differential. The Pathfinder also does not offer approach, departure, and breakover angles or ground clearance that we see in something like the Nissan Armada or some of Nissan's other dedicated off-roading products, or of course competition like the Jeep Grand Cherokee. Nissan has yet to tell us what the 2017 Pathfinder will cost, and that makes it really difficult to make meaningful comparisons. However, they have increased the level of standard equipment on all Pathfinder models. The S trim, which they say will start under $30,000, so you can think $29,995, We'll start with 18-inch wheels standard, Bluetooth, XM satellite radio, and the new touchscreen infotainment system, although it won't have navigation from what we understand. Because the three-row crossover segment is so competitive, I don't expect prices to really change too much versus last year, although I do expect Nissan to be adding more standard feature content than we saw before. The SV trim is likely going to start around $33,000. I think that's the realistic base model for the Pathfinder line, although those new features in the S trim make that definitely more usable than before. The SL trim is still going to be the model where you first get leather at around $36,500 in my estimation, and the top-end Platinum trim that we've been taking a look at, where almost everything is standard, should start right around $42,000. If you want Nissan's active all-wheel drive system, that will set you back $1,700, and you can add it to any trim level. All the engines are the same, so you really just pick your trim level, you pick certain feature options, and you pick whether or not you'd want all-wheel drive. If you're looking for a comfortable, family-friendly three-row crossover, definitely keep the Pathfinder on your shopping list. This segment is getting very crowded, especially with the brand new Mazda CX-9 that actually beats this when it comes to fuel economy, even though it uses a turbocharged engine and a traditional 6-speed automatic transmission. Nissan fights back with a ton of family-friendly features like that second row seat, where you can actually leave a child seat latched into place and still fold it forward to get into the third row. Nissan also has one of the highest towing capacities in this segment, although towing with a CVT is a very different experience than towing with a traditional automatic transmission. The Honda Pilot and the Toyota Highlander may be a little bit more reliable in the long run than the Nissan, but this is going to be less expensive than either of those options when comparably equipped. You're also going to find considerably more room on the inside than the Toyota Highlander. The Highlander is one of the smaller options in this segment, and it's very noticeable right back there in the third row, where we get considerably less room, even though Toyota tries to jam 3 seats across that third row. The Ford Explorer is one of the most efficiently packaged vehicles in this segment. We have a great deal of interior room that actually rivals the Pathfinder, with more storage space behind the third row. However, the Ford Explorer will cost you more, especially in the top-end trims. Be sure and stay tuned for the full review of the 2017 Nissan Pathfinder when we can get our hands on one for a full week. Again, it's a little bit difficult to talk, especially about value, when we don't know all of the pricing details for this model yet. I'll see you next week.